We have some major updates regarding the future of multiple different Toronto Raptors, so we'll discuss how it impacts the team going forward and how it will change light on terms of what's going to happen in this year's free agency. Additionally, we have a major update in the Eastern Conference that does have a significant impact on the Toronto Raptors and their current goals for this season, so lots of stuff to break down. But before we do, folks, again, over 55% of our viewers are not subscribed to the channel, and we want to keep you up to date with all of the latest Toronto Raptors news. And we missed the last 2-3 days there in terms of uploads. My apologies on that. More flights getting canceled, delayed, and just a lot of stuff going on. But we're back. We're ready to roll, deliver the regularly scheduled content. So let's dive into what's been going on. So we have an update regarding the Toronto Raptors' future, and 3 players in terms of what they could expect in terms of their future contracts and stuff. So basically, Doug Smith from the Toronto Star was asked about the impending free agents, upcoming this summer, and this was a big topic of conversation for the Toronto Raptors this entire year. Now, it was more notable when the 3 free agents, the main free agents the Raptors had, were Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and Gary Trent Jr. But now, while we traded away Pascal, we traded away OG, we have a different set of free agents now following this year's trade deadline, a different look roster, but we have some updates in terms of what we can expect in terms of how this team will look in the future. So basically, Doug Smith said he's 100% sure that Kelly Olynyk and Emmanuel Quickley have deals in place. The question is about Gary Trent Jr., and it's going to be the cost, the number of years, and whether others are able to do what he does at a lower salary. I don't get any read on how either side feels about that right now. So interesting stuff there. Now, we've already seen news. We've already seen things come out regarding Kelly Olynyk and how it's expected in the next couple weeks that we might have an extension incoming, prior to the offseason for Kelly Olynyk. He'll be locked into this team for a longer term, maybe not like a 4-year, 5-year deal, but a 2-year, 3-year contract with the Toronto Raptors to have him as a steady vet that spaces the floor for this team moving into the future. So I don't want to dive too much into Kelly Olynyk. We've discussed him a bunch since this year's trade deadline, but the 2 interesting pieces are obviously Emmanuel Quickley as well as Gary Trent Jr. Now, I'll talk about IQ first because, again, he's been the guy handed the reins to the new Toronto Raptors up-and-coming point guard. When the trade happened, he looked like he was the centerpiece in terms of what was the return in that OG Anunoby deal, even though RJ Barrett has arguably been a lot better for the Toronto Raptors. But I think both pieces are awesome young prospects to have for this team long term. But Emmanuel Quickley obviously is a guy that we've seen the reports, especially for the New York Knicks. There's expectations he's going to get around a 20 to 25, maybe a little bit higher annual salary in his upcoming contract. So 25 plus million for Emmanuel Quickley is something that, again, IQ's been good. He's been a nice piece, a nice acquisition for the Toronto Raptors. He's had some highs, he's had some lows in terms of games. I wouldn't call him super inconsistent or anything, but, shooting guards, shoot first, or players that their offense is drawn in by shooting some buckets, right? They're going to have some highs and lows over the course of their careers and games, especially where IQ's younger. But looking at his stats, he's a guy that's only 24 years old, 6'3", been a very sneaky good defender for the Toronto Raptors as well. It's something I like to see. But for this season, averaging 16, 3, and 3, 43% from the field, 41% behind the three-point line, and those numbers have only gone up since he's joined the Toronto Raptors. If you look at his stats as a Toronto Raptor, the points didn't take the crazy jump that some people were hoping, only 17 points per game, which is still really, really solid, but averaging 6 assists per night. The rebounds have gone up, his opportunity, not playing behind Jalen Brunson, it makes sense for his stats to increase, and then the three-point shooting, which is, the just efficiency, especially from behind the three-point line. 43%, that shot has increased with an elevated number of attempts, so that's a positive thing to there. Overall, his efficiency has decreased. He hasn't been able to get to the rim, finish around the basket as well as he did in New York, so overall, he's become a little bit less efficient with an extended role, but as he said in different interviews, obviously getting handed the reins to a new team that's in a very transitional period right now. As a young guard, there's going to be learning curves. There's going to be learning steps. But the big picture stuff for Emmanuel Quickley, being the point guard for this team, he's still scoring, even if it's a little bit less efficient. He's facilitating at that point guard spot. He's trying to pick and rolls while he's hitting some nice passes out there from the eye test, and he's still able to knock down that 3 at a high clip. Like, his jump shot didn't disappear with an elevated roll. I'm confident all the other things will fall into place pretty well. So IQ, since being on the Toronto Raptors, has shown enough to me to be warranted, a 25 plus $1 million contract. If we're going over 30, then that might be something to turn your head on and say, okay, maybe that's a little bit too much, depending on length as well and how that thing's going to shake out. But I'm not too worried about giving Emmanuel quickly a significant contract for the future. Now, what about Gary Trent Jr.? Because Gary Trent Jr. is one of the more polarizing players for the Toronto Raptors. I mean, the star boy, he's had an interesting season this year. That's really the only way to describe his season, because overall, he has certainly regressed. He's certainly taken a step back. I mean, Gary Trent Jr. at 25 years old is now only averaging 12 points per game, 2 rebounds, 1.5 assists, but he is shooting 42% from behind the three-point line, had a ridiculous sort of percentage during January, and is a guy that, again, can get you buckets in terms of deep shots, middies, and just be, a very inconsistent sort of, bucket getter for the Toronto Raptors. Overall, this season, you can see how his everything sort of dipped, or, well, it's below his career average. He took a significant dip. I believe he was scoring about 17, 18 points per game last season. So that's a significant jump, and the advanced stats really don't like Gary this year, especially. Value over replacement player, it's down in the negatives. His box plus minus, offensive, defensive, overall is just not looking too good there. Not a lot of win shares, just not a lot of positives in the advanced numbers for Gary Trent Jr. this season. Even though his three-point percentage has been pretty solid, his overall true shooting hasn't been that great. So you pair that alongside, he hasn't taken that leap that we're all hoping from him defensively. Those off-season sort of Instagram posts saying how he wants to be a defensive player of the year. Heck, even a couple years ago when he was asked to take a step up on the defensive end, and he did. He did show off a guy that got a lot of deflections, that was quick in the passing lanes, got steals. That energy, that motivation on that end of the floor, I don't want to say motivation's bad, but he hasn't been as effective on the defensive end for the Toronto Raptors this year. So when you're talking contracts, and really we haven't heard about any particular numbers for Gary Trent Jr. over this entire season. The only thing we can point back to is what was being discussed last season. People were talking about around $20 million per year for Gary Trent Jr. I mean, for a young shooter that had some potential in the defensive end, that was on seemingly an upward trajectory, that seemed like a reasonable enough contract. It's a lot, but reasonable. But after his performance this year, really taking a step back rather than a step forward, just even though he's knocking down his threes at a pretty efficient clip, his scoring overall hasn't been that great. He hasn't improved his finishing around the rim. He's not getting as many buckets from the mid-range area. His overall scoring ability just hasn't taken that jump. He hasn't improved as a passer, especially where the Raptors are now looking to have a system where they're swinging the ball. They're sort of, making the right play, making the right pass. Gary hasn't taken that leap. So if we're going to be paying a significant contract, and, last season, apparently an extension was imminent, according to Chris Haynes, right? It's questionable to see what the Raptors be willing to offer. I don't think they'd be willing to offer the $20 million per year. I think especially with the emergence of Grady Dick and how well he's been playing as of late, I don't think Gary Trent Jr. getting a huge bag, especially long term, makes a whole ton of sense for this team. But who really knows? He is a guy that has a very strong NBA skill, shooting the basketball. He's a guy that has shown promise on the defensive end in the past. I'm not a guy that's saying, hey, we should shove Gary out the door, but I'm also not a guy that's super eager to give him a boatload of money. So we'll see how it all shakes out. Again, it doesn't seem like anyone knows what's going on with this situation. There has been no updates on either side, what either side is looking for. So don't be surprised if Gary's the guy that walks, IQ is the guy that stays, and Kelly Olynyk also gets extended for this season. So that's some major updates regarding the players on this team. But we also have a major update in the Eastern Conference, because the Raptors sneakily have gotten a couple wins as of late. They've gotten a couple big sort of W's. Again, traveling and stuff the past couple days have been a nightmare for me. I missed the specific games, so I watched the highlights, of course, saw the box scores and things, and the Toronto Raptors, they've been getting a couple W's. They've been getting a couple wins, and we've heard basically Darko Rajakovic come out and say that the Toronto Raptors are playing to win. They want to get experience in the play-in tournament, and also talked about getting better every single day, which I'd say is more of a attainable goal. So the Raptors are in a weird spot in the Eastern Conference right now. I mean, we're about, behind the Atlanta Hawks, 3.5 games. So nothing drastic, nothing that's unsurmountable, in the Eastern Conference and stuff like that. Some people are saying we should just bottom out, given the Raptors' current positioning, and then maximize our odds of getting into the top 6 and not trading away our Spurs pick. But however that shakes out, however that sort of goes, the Raptors seem focused on winning. They don't want to throw away the second half of the season. They don't want to waste a development year at Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick, just throwing games, throwing in the towel. And the Raptors, There's the Nets and the Hawks who they got their wins against. So nothing too crazy, nothing to really just get amped up about something crazy about to happen. But we have an update because the Atlanta Hawks All-Star Trae Young is undergoing surgery to repair a ligament tear in his fifth finger in his left hand, which will be reevaluated in 4 weeks. So, as you can see in the standings, the Atlanta Hawks are really the team the Toronto Raptors have to catch if they want to enter the play-in tournament. They're the most realistic team that the team could be able to catch. So, if Trae Young's out, again, they have DeJounte Murray. They're an interesting squad. They've lost some games themselves. Heck, they lost to us. Without Trae Young, there could be a path, there could be an opportunity for the Toronto Raptors to enter that play-in tournament, make a push to win some meaningful games, get better every day, and actually, achieve a play-in sort of status. Now, I know a lot of people have thrown out the quote from Cy Ujiri a couple years ago, play in for what? All that type of stuff, but I do like the attitude of not trying to lose, trying to win games. Do I think it's surmountable? Do I think we could probably catch them? I have no idea. This team looks really good some nights, really bad some others. That's usually the case with younger teams. And if we get closer to the end of the season and the play-in does seem unsurmountable, I do think it does make sense to maybe tank away, the month of April or something to ensure we are below the Brooklyn Nets, to maybe even catch the Memphis Grizzlies, to really maximize our potential of keeping that pick, because that pick would be immensely valuable for this team for the future, and then make some moves in the offseason that makes this roster make a bit more sense, and then really push to win some games next year. But I don't mind the team competing in March, especially with the Hawks. Probably going to be losing some games in the future here now at this point. Again, watching the games, I missed the last couple. I'm still rooting for this team to win. I'll never root against the Toronto Raptors, but that's sort of what I'm seeing. That's how I'm feeling about this squad. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. You guys are the best to make this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. I'm signing out. Cheers.